Hello, and happy Children's Environmental Health Day. My name is Diana Van Vleet, and I am the National Director of Outreach and Engagement for the American Lung Association's Healthy Air campaign. I want to start by saying thank you so much to the Children's Environmental Health Network for their leadership on addressing the environmental health issues affecting our most precious resource, our children. I'm delighted to be joined here today by a distinguished group of panelists to discuss the urgent need for the nation to protect our kids from harmful pollution by investing in zero-emission electric buses. Nationwide, 95% of school buses today are powered by diesel, and diesel exhaust is toxic. Kids have developing lungs and brains, and that puts them at greater risk of permanent harm from the many air pollutants that come from burning diesel, like nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and benzene. And that pollution is also an environmental justice issue. The impacts of emissions from school buses are especially profound in Black and Hispanic communities who are exposed to disproportionately high levels of particle pollution, as well as children from low-income communities who are more likely to depend on school buses to get to school. There is an alternative, a future in which no kid going to school has to fear exposure to pollutants that harm their ability to learn once they get there. Zero-emission electric school buses are here. They have no tailpipe exhaust, making them an immediate benefit to public health. And they don't emit the greenhouse gases that cause climate change, making them a critical part of the climate solution. Millions of families rely on their local school buses to get their children to school. And when they wave goodbye to their kids on the bus stop every morning, they deserve to know that their ride will be clean and safe and put them on the road to a healthy future. Before I introduce our esteemed panel, I'd like to show a new ad from the American Lung Association to remind us of how important this issue is. I'd now like to introduce our speakers. Jill Aquino is a volunteer with the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments. She was a school nurse for over 16 years at Newton High School in New Jersey. Prior to that, she worked as a pediatric nurse at Overlook Hospital and as a psychiatric nurse at St. Clair's Hospital. Jill recently spoke to Congress about the need for electric school buses so we can dramatically reduce air pollution burdens on our nation's children. Rohan Arora is a climate activist focused on environmental health and climate justice. He is a climate activist advisor for the American Lung Association and the executive director and founder of the Community Checkup, a national environmental health organization that makes environmental health resources more accessible and empowers youth to become environmental health warriors in their local communities. Nick Torres is an advocacy director for the American Lung Association, where he oversees the Healthy School Bus campaign. He has worked in a variety of roles in public policy and advocacy over the past 12 years, most recently serving as the American Lung Association State Advocacy Lead in Indiana. Welcome, panelists. Jill, I will start with some questions for you. As a longtime school nurse, you were on the front lines of helping children facing environmental health harms, including air pollution. Do you have any examples of local efforts you witnessed or participated in aimed at reducing pollution from diesel school buses?
Sure, Diana. So there are two things. One of the things that I had done a little while back, before we even we're linking air pollution and asthma rates and obesity rates, severe allergy rates together. I went to a seminar specifically designed for school nurses to discuss what can school nurses do to make the air quality inside the schools and outside the schools more healthy for our children. And two of the things that were very salient to me was getting our school buses to stop idling on school campuses while dropping off and picking up students, and also getting people to stop smoking on our school campuses. So those were two of the things that I had implemented in my school from that seminar. The other thing that I'm currently working on in Sussex County, New Jersey, where I currently live and where I worked, I'm working on a farm to table um, um, pilot program, if you will. I'm trying to work with 4 different schools in Sussex County, New Jersey. I'm trying to link our local farmers with those schools in order to get the food from our farmers that are healthy into the mouths of our children in those schools. I also am doing this to support local farmers. But one of the things that is so critical, and why we're here today, is getting the emissions, getting the tailpipes from the dirty trucks out of our communities. And I think that if I can get this pilot program off the ground, we're going to see a dramatic increase in the health of our children, because they're going to be eating healthy food from the local farmers. And the trucks that are delivering the unhealthy food aren't going to be sitting idling on school campuses while delivering unhealthy food. So I think this is a win-win, and I'm really excited to see this get off the ground.
Thanks, Jill, and thanks for your leadership.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So Rohan, it seems as though younger people are increasingly aware of how their environment impacts their health. Do you have any thoughts about why this change is occurring? And do you have any guidance on the best way to share this information in an engaging way with kids and teens?
Sure. So that's a great question. And honestly, historically, a very small set of youth activists in the climate space have been focusing on environmental health issues. A lot of this has to do with a lack of coverage on the disparities that exist regarding climate health. But a lot of it also has to do with how youth have previously associated the environmental movement as one just resulting in ecological consequences, rather than also understanding the direct public health and medical ramifications of issues like air pollution, especially for communities of color. Witnessing the impacts that air pollution had on my father's worsening asthma, I saw the connection firsthand between climate and health, which actually has led me to found the Community Checkup to address this major gaping hole in the climate space today. Going past just worrying about my father's health, seeing this connection also made me worry about my own health in a world with worsening environmental and air quality. And this sentiment is extremely common nowadays amongst youth. We see that the climate crisis is one of the highest contributors to the youth mental health crisis in our nation. The root of why more and more people are becoming aware of this connection between climate and health comes down to the state of young people's future today, as it currently stands. With information sharing through social media that has really highlighted lived experiences of many, especially children of color, we're able to see how much of an unhealthy genetic profile that many of our youth are being forced to be raised under. Environmental justice has also gained significant coverage over the last year with relation to race, socioeconomic status, and more. And that's really helped shine a major light on these existing climate health disparities that exist and that are permeating throughout so many of these marginalized communities. So this cultural change regarding young people wanting to engage in environmental health is much needed, and honestly serves as a very critical way to allow youth to make their voices heard. For those that might be interested in educating their children and teens about the connection between climate and health topics, I'd honestly recommend finding very credible information about the link between these exposures in our environment and one's health from organizations that are already working in this space, whether that be American Lung Association, for example. There is so much good information that's already published in a very easy to digest format that is a very age-appropriate way of teaching children and teenagers about climate health. Also, as a young climate activist that's entering the field of medicine, some of the best experiences I had were from speaking and shadowing with health providers that communicated what types of disparities they were seeing in real life in their clinical settings. So many will tell you that issues like asthma, other respiratory issues, heat-related illness, obesity, they're becoming so much more common because of these environmental issues that are targeting local communities. Parents, you can likely get a community-tailored information or narratives to share with your children by speaking with health providers such as nurses, NPs, PAs, physicians that are working directly in your community. So those are the 2 cents that I would give about some guidance to help educate your children and teens about what's going on in their local communities and kind of start engaging with them.
Thank you so much, Rohan. And just to build on that, beyond education, what is the best way to engage younger people in advocacy efforts to help clean up air pollution in their communities from school buses and from other sources?
Sure. So one of the best ways, in my opinion, to engage with young people and encourage them to participate in these advocacy efforts is to allow them to engage directly with their community. Oftentimes, at least growing up, I knew that sometimes I was very sheltered from issues that were impacting my community. I was seeing them firsthand. However, I was living in a bubble. However, when I was able to see them firsthand, it made a big difference on what I wanted to make out of my life and the role that I wanted to play in my community. By instilling the importance of civic action in youth through promoting volunteerism and advocacy efforts, they'll be able to see how they can make a lasting impact on their communities. And this is something that I've been working on for years now. The Community Checkup actually launched the Warrior program to empower youth that might not know how exactly to make a change in their communities, to help them lead projects that are not only very impactful, but also very sustainable regarding climate health. So that includes legislative changes, that includes engaging with the health sector and more. So for air pollution specifically, emissions from our predominantly diesel operated school bus fleet is going to lead to a lot of issues with the health and wellness of our youth. So this is where the importance of partnerships and community engagement comes in. The health, environmental, educational sectors, and more, they can all work together to highlight how we can improve air quality and directly engage younger people in advocacy efforts. An example of this could be educators who also teach their students about legislative change, the civic process, and teach them about activities like letter writing to representatives or speaking directly to your organizations that are working on the grassroots level. In addition, allowing guest speakers like health providers from the community that have expertise in the health and environmental sectors to directly speak with students and young people. That's going to make a big difference and motivate them to pursue climate health advocacy because it'll show them what is actually happening in their local communities. And that'll help clean up air pollution in their communities as a byproduct. So by directly engaging younger people with these advocacy efforts, we can essentially motivate the leaders of tomorrow and make a significant and lasting difference.
Thank you so much, Rohan, for your perspective and expertise and for all of the great work you're doing with the Community Checkup and beyond. And last but not least, Nick, so we know that air pollution from diesel school buses is harming our kids, contributing to climate change and worsening health inequities. What can we do about it?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Diane. And happy to be here to talk a little bit more about the opportunities we have to make a difference here. And I wanted to touch on something that Rohan said that really resonated with me, talking about how we approach these issues with young people and getting them involved. And I think part of the reason that I've approached this work is, I still can remember being a kid in the back of the school bus with my shirt pulled up over my nose because the diesel exhaust was making me sick. I grew up thinking a lot about the air I was breathing. My junior high baseball diamond was right across the street from a big oil refinery, and I can still remember what it smelled like. And so I think some of those memories really stick with us, and I think we should always keep in mind that these are some of the ways that kids are approaching some of these big issues like climate change that we're all working on. And over the years, some things haven't really changed that much, right? So the yellow school bus is still this instantly recognizable fixture on our roads. And as you mentioned, Diana, nationally, about 95% of all the school buses on the road are still powered by diesel fuels. So that hasn't changed. But what has changed, right, is that we're growing to understand just how toxic diesel exhaust can be, especially for young people, as they have developing brains and hearts and lungs, and how sensitive they can be to all of the pollutants that that come from burning diesel, right? Some of the things that have changed, right, again, are these technologies. So you mentioned like the technology for electric school buses, for zero emission school buses is here. We're already seeing many school districts starting to introduce zero emission school buses into their fleets. But in order to get this solution to scale and to ensure that electric school buses can reach the communities where the need is the greatest, we really need decisive action from our leaders in Washington. And so that's something that is really coming up on the radar right now. President Biden included in his agenda for the American Jobs Plan earlier this year, the idea to electrify 20% of our nation's school bus fleet. And following on that, several congressional champions introduced legislation called the Clean Commute for Kids Act to help deliver on that. So Senator Alex Padilla and Representative Tony Cardenas each introduced bills in the Senate and the House to dedicate $25 billion over 10 years toward a new program at EPA to help school districts locally make the switch from diesel school buses to zero emission school buses. And some of this legislation is now included in these key investments that Congress is negotiating right now. And so the Lung Association and many other national partners are urging Congress to prioritize these investments in school bus electrification, because even though electric school buses can save money for school districts in the long run, there's still an upfront cost that is sometimes a deterrent for local school districts. They still cost a little bit more to get up and running than a diesel school bus. And so by investing in this transition to electric school buses and other zero emission transportation nationally, our hope is also that we can boost demand for electric vehicles and fleets across the country so that the technology can become more and more accessible. I think this is the best opportunity that we have as Congress is negotiating these investments, the best opportunity that we have to invest in a healthier future, right? So much of the public focus around these bills in Congress has been on, infrastructure, but it really goes much further than just roads and bridges, right? So, we need major investments in things like expanding clean energy production and making our electric grids more resilient to climate change, to support a pollution-free transportation sector. And so investing in school bus electrification is a perfect example of how we can lower emissions, improve air quality, and in doing so, also get better health and learning outcomes for children. And so this is exactly what we mean when we talk about urging Congress to invest in a healthier future. And so these are some of the things that we're really calling on Congress to do. But it's also important to point out, right, this should not even be a political issue. So according to a poll that we released in July, a really strong majority, about 68% of voters support this type of large-scale federal investment in school bus electrification. 72% of voters said they'd rather have electric school buses in their own neighborhoods over diesel buses. And 82% actually said that reducing air pollution around children is not a partisan issue at all. It's just common sense. So we know that it's a good investment in children's health and our environment. And we know that it's popular with the public, but we really just need Congress to act on this and really come through on these investments. And so that's what we're working on with the American Lung Association. And I hope, I know we can count on all our panelists here, but the viewing public to also support our efforts to call on Congress to invest in the transition to zero emission school buses.
Thank you, Nick. And thanks for all the work you're doing. I know that we are running out of time, but just really quickly before we wrap, I wanted to ask each of you, and quickly, less than a minute, a sentence if you can, what is the one thing you want to tell viewers that you really want to emphasize the most on this topic? And Jill, we'll start with you.
Sure. So really, what's most critical for me as a school nurse is I think about, okay, I know we only have a certain amount of money to, invest in electric school buses. I would like to see, quite honestly, 100% of our school bus fleet electrified. And this is why. If our children were taking in poison, would we only eliminate a certain percentage of that poison that they're taking in? No, absolutely not. Common sense tells us you eliminate 100% of that poison, right? To make the child well. So as a school nurse, eliminating the diesel fueled school buses that are toxic to our children are going to decrease our asthma rates in our children, going to decrease the obesity and overweight and severe allergy issues in our children. It's going to improve their lungs. It's going to improve their airways. It's going to improve their hearts, their blood vessels. And again, as we talked about earlier, their brains, their developing brains. And we know that particle concentration levels on school buses are 5 to 10 times greater in and around the school bus compared to the surrounding community. And we know that's especially true when children are on the school bus and they're getting on and off the school bus when they're being picked up and dropped off. And approximately 25 million school children ride the school bus each day from anywhere 20 minutes to several hours. So we really need to boldly invest in electric school buses.
Thank you, Jill. Rohan?
Adding on to Jill's point, actually, one of the most important things that I think is a major takeaway is the importance of parents and schools working together. And the reason I say this is when I was younger, I remember what Nick mentioned about that distinct smell of a bus, especially when the heat is like 90 degrees or 100 degrees. It's marked in my head for the next several decades for sure. And one of the issues with that is that I used to complain to my mom about that almost every single day. I used to ask, Mom, can you please pick me up from school instead of me going on the bus? So it's not that children and teens are not making their concerns known. It's just that we have to start believing them. And when we start believing them, what can occur is we can start working directly with youth. There's this sentiment that, oh, youth are just little kids, little kids can't do much. But we're seeing that youth have really been changing the entire game, from being in the sphere of activism, from promoting technological developments. Youth have a lot of power, and the power that they hold is just going to increase as time progresses. They're the generation that's going to be most impacted by the climate crisis. And for that reason, as a scientific, as a social justice community, we really need to emphasize the importance of working across age groups to better understand the concerns and the skill sets that each group of people can bring to the table. And by doing so, we can really make lasting impacts and address all those issues that Jill said and act in a common sense manner and take out all that poison. We're not going to just take 10% of it out. We're going to go 100% and really make lasting impacts.
Amen. Thanks. Nick?
Sure. So I think two quick things. Number one is I'd encourage everybody, make sure that your representatives in Washington know that you care about school bus electrification, and that they support it too. And after that, make sure you're talking to your school boards and your superintendents, because fingers crossed, the funding goes through for school bus electrification. The next step is going to be making sure that school districts actually apply for that funding. And so making sure that your school board and superintendent know that this is a priority for your community, and that you care about cleaner air for kids to breathe. That's what it comes down to.
Thank you again so much, Jill, Rohan, and Nick. And huge thanks to the Children's Environmental Health Network for hosting Children's Environmental Health Day and this wonderful virtual event. With issues as big and important as reducing air pollution so that all children have healthy air to breathe, everyone has a role to play. Health professionals, young advocates, policymakers, parents, teachers, everyone. To learn more about what you can do to be part of the electric school bus solution, please visit lung.org/wheelsonthebus. Thank you so much.